We are coming to you from Brass Expo 2015. We're with Dave Schneider. He is the owner of SMR Trains. Now, some of our customers might not be as familiar because we just started carrying your product, but we've admired it for years and I've had it in from time to time, and we know some of our customers have as well. But we just wanted to talk to you a little bit. You have a very interesting take on importing brass with your prototype you
Yes.
choose. And go ahead and tell us a little bit about that and some of the challenges you face and what you try to accomplish as an importer, Dave.
Well, going into the brass import business is a craft more than it is a business. There's a lot of nuances and things that you learn the hard way. It's a fraternity of suffering, you might say. There's a lot of curiosity about dealing with and how do you deal with the people in Asia. There's language barriers, things of that nature. And then, of course, there's the various financial situations and the fact that they don't easily take to any kind of innovation or anything that's out of the norm. You want to tell them, oh, I'm going to make a K4, they'll just do great making a K4. But you tell them you want to do a 1855 440, and they kind of look at you and say, okay, we'll do it. You know, but they don't know anything about it.
Yeah, interesting. So what are some of the challenges you've faced with like getting the paint schemes? And you have a very unique product that jumps out at people, but how have you accomplished that?
Well, the paint is the holy grail of 19th century because, of course, there's no color photographs of anything. The closest you have is a color advertising lithograph, and the colors within the lithographs are usually questionable. It was what inks were available at the time. And so you go through a lot of research checking out written accounts of engines, things of that nature. You develop and have to develop a really close working relationship with some of the major railroad museums in the country. And you do studies of things like how to compare the early type of black and white to the modern black and white, because those don't match either. The wet plate photography does not absorb color the same way that the dry film does. And so a color that would appear to be a light color in a modern black and white photograph comes out like black in a wet plate. The result is that there have been studies done of it, and I have like charts of color charts of comparisons to say, okay, well, yellow, for example, is almost always black in these colors, and so it's a difficult thing. But ultimately, you find that when you're doing this era, that the museum guys, the scholars and stuff, are so absolutely delighted that someone is actually paying attention to this period, that they are open-handed with their knowledge, and it is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's great, because I know a lot of importers have shied away from that era, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head as why is, you know, it's always scary to do something if you don't have the knowledge to do it right. And so I know you've built up a very loyal clientele who love what you do. Is that correct?
Yeah, I typically do not sell to dealers
Right.
because of the fact that I know that I have a baseline group of people who will pretty much order what I offer, and my production numbers are low and serial numbered and things like that, and so they are very proud collectors. I hesitate to say this, but when you find one on the secondary market, it usually means that some tragedy has occurred, because I know, for example, one client whose wife passed on, and he decided to get out of all of his trains and sell them all, and he did. He sold every one of his trains. He had a very extensive collection, but he didn't sell a single one of mine. He decided something is worth keeping. Those were his favorites.
Right, very nice. Well, and that's part of the reason we started carrying Dave's product, is it's unique, fills a niche that we like, and we appreciate you doing that. And again, that's why we wanted to get it to a lot of our customers, what you do. Now, just briefly, I know you're talking to me about some of the technological advances in manufacturing, and some ideas you have. Could you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yes, my current project is actually to be made in the United States. It is the first time in decades that anyone has tried to seriously produce a brass model in the U.S. And the way I'm able to do this, or risk this, doing this, is the fact that 3D printing is allowing me to bypass the strongest and most expensive part, the strongest suit of the Asians, and the most expensive to do in the U.S., which is pattern making. To have an expert pattern maker make the masters for the lost wax castings and such used in the brass trains is enormously expensive and enormously time consuming. However, a really talented 3D designer with a good 3D printing system can actually produce this in a matter of days where it would take weeks and months. I figure this is going to cut as much as 6 months off the time of building a model, and it will make it then economical to build them here.
Right, and just to clarify for our customers, it's not that the part is 3D printed, you're 3D printing the master.
The master,
right?
Exactly.
So still a brass
to make
part.
Right, it's
exactly.
The master for the gloss wax casting.
Yes.
That is then made in the traditional way.
Right.
And there are people in this country who are capable of assembling and building these models. But to make these masters is an extraordinarily highly skilled person. There are very few people who can do that.
Even left. And that's why it's emerging with technology, but yet you're not sacrificing the product. It's still got the same attributes, and the same beauty, and the same hand-built qualities they've always had.
It's exactly the same. It's just that the manufacturing development is being modernized and sped up. I think this is the way of the future for brass because it keeps your costs down. Interestingly enough, my Made in USA locomotive will be $400 cheaper than my last Korean-made model.
Wow, and remind us of which model that's going to be again?
This is going to be the B&O Grasshopper engine of 1835, and it's tender. And this is a very unique model. It's been something that a lot of my clients have been interested in buying for quite some time. It's going to be a limited edition to 50 pieces only.
Very nice.
And each one, as usual, will be serial numbered and such. And so we've already got 50% of them reserved.
We're really looking forward to seeing how that turns out. So I was going to ask you a little bit about what got you into importing brass and your interest of trains.
Well, like a lot of people, I started out as a child. My father bought me a Lionel train when I was 6 years old, and it just fascinated me. And it fascinated me with trains to the point where my childhood room was decorated with pictures of 440s and things because I was heavily into the Civil War centennial period.
Right.
And I had an obsession. I had a Lionel General, which I still own, the original plastic Lionel General that my dad bought me in 1959, I got.
That's great.
And so that really got me always interested, and I became through my education, I'm a history major. I have a master's in history, and specifically in 19th century history, and so it's always fit, but life takes you in strange ways, and so I had a very checkered career, none of which involved history until actually relatively recently, when last 7 or 8 years I was teaching at a junior college and such. But I suddenly decided that this was the time to do it. I wanted to do it. I've always wanted to do it. I wanted to make trains. If you asked me at 6 years old, what did you want to do when you grow up? I didn't say a fireman. I said I wanted to make trains. So it's just a matter of patience. Eventually you too can make trains.
And you've been able to combine two of your loves, history and trains. And I think with many of the importers, and this is true of you, that shows through in the product we get, because it's your love that creates a great product for us to enjoy.
I think that passion is absolutely required. If you don't care about the model you're building, you're going to build something slipshod. You're going to say, oh, well, you know, this piece here is going to cost me something extra to put in. I think I'll just eliminate it. I'll tell you an actual story. It cost me a lot of money. In my last project, which was the 1850s Rogers engine, I went by the standard information I was able to find, which says that Rogers produced these engines with 8-wheel tenders. However, because I have sources in other museums and such, I was provided late in the game with a document from the Rogers company with the specifications of the engine, the original order book specifications. And lo and behold, this engine was provided with a 6-wheel tender, which meant the tender I was doing was wrong, and the tender was already in production.
Oh, yeah.
So I directed that, much to the dismay of my builder and much to the dismay of my pocketbook, I directed them to scrap all of those extra 8-wheel tenders and to build me a completely different 6-wheel tender.
Wow.
Because I simply will not tolerate making a mistake.
Well, we appreciate your integrity. Well, Dave, thanks again for coming by.
Thank you, Dan.
We appreciate it.